It's time for College Sports Weekly. How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Bill Hazen. Amid this year's college football bowl games, the various football programs are scrambling to land recruits during the early recruiting window. With the change in coaches last year, Texas Tech has a great deal of work to do. Coach Matt Wells says the Raiders are making progress.
What a difference a year makes. And standing up here last year, just trying to keep a few of the signees that had been previously committed to Tech committed and get out on the road and really start making the inroads for the 2020 class. And so 1 year through this process, this 2020 class is 80% assembled. And just got a few things about this class. 15 high school signees, 3 junior college kids, 1 grad transfer as of now. 5 of these are enrolling in January, here in a month, to start winter training and start classes in the spring. 17 of these signees were 2-sport athletes. 10 of the 17 were 3-sport athletes. And then of note, every high school signee that we signed is from the state of Texas.
The Raiders lost 6 of their last 7 to finish 4-8. And that's some of what's happening. Here's what's coming up on College Sports Weekly. As the bowl season kicks off, we're here with the analysis. The High Plains drifter of college football, Coach John Jenkins, steps to the microphone to size up the early bowl games. And the coach looks at this year's college football overachievers. Guess who's on that list? How high might SEC football's TV rights go in the next round of negotiations? Rex Lardner will tell you when we talk shop. We'll visit with ratings impresario Cody Kellner and find out why his ratings say that Ohio State is the team to beat in the CFP. And John DeLisio covers the college football playoffs on the Small College Beat. That's all ahead on College Sports Weekly.
Music is a bridge between the material and the spiritual. My name is Harvey Lauer, and I'm 82. As a blind person, you have to be aware that nobody can tell you what you can or can't do. You really have to try things. My folks got me a little radio in 1940, and that was the best Christmas present I ever got. When I was 11 years old is when I started to play music, play the piano, and then the accordion, and then the cello. My wife, who was also blind, was a good cook. When she died, that's when I started Meals on Wheels. America, let's do lunch.
It's Meals on Wheels. 1 in 6 seniors faces the threat of hunger, and millions more live in isolation. Drop off a hot meal and say a quick hello. Volunteer for Meals on Wheels by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org. This message brought to you by Meals on Wheels America and the Ad Council.
Take a look under your bed. Find stuff under there? What about jobs? No? Now try your basement. There's a pair of overalls that overall you're not so into anymore. A perfectly good laptop that hasn't seen your lap in months. And even more stuff. But still no jobs? Well, you really have both. See, stuff is defined as household articles considered as a group. Sometimes this stuff is no longer needed. Wait, no longer needed? That can't be right. Because remember those jobs you were looking for? Those are really needed. And they're the stuff inside your stuff. Even inside that winter coat that moved with you to Phoenix. Our job is to unlock those jobs. And it starts when you donate your stuff to your local Goodwill. Here's how we do it. When you donate to Goodwill, we sell your stuff to provide job training for people right here in your community. So just by teaming up with Goodwill, you help create jobs. And isn't that worth parting with the leftover keytar from your 80s cover band? Goodwill. Donate stuff, create jobs. Find your nearest donation center at goodwill.org. A message from Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Hey, it is time to go bowling, and that's what this first segment is about. We're going to bring in the High Plains drifter of college football. He's a guy who, like good bowlers, has often converted those 7-10 splits. Oops, that's another sport. Excuse me. We'll leave that one out and get right to football. That's what we mean when we're talking bowling. And it's great to have Coach with us. Coach, where are you right now?
I am in Little Rock, Arkansas. I have ventured back into the big neighborhood of the SEC here, Bill, and I will be leaving a bloody trail down through the states of Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, right back into Florida here soon. Had a little function at the governor's mansion today, and certainly everybody is setting their sights and trying to get a good taste back in their mouth for Arkansas Razorback football. And I tell you what, it's going to take a while to get that going again, it looks like to me.
You guys were drawing some plays on napkins again?
Oh, yeah, that's right, on the governor's mansion's tablecloths. There you go. Now, I tell you what, they're going to be frowning on that when they see those plays drawn up tonight when they get to cleaning up. But I tell you, Bill, it's, getting back to your remarks about the bowls. Hey, we've got a couple under our belt already. SMU, our good buddy. I tell you what, Sonny Dykes, what a great job he did this year. And certainly Florida Atlantic. Lane Kiffin's taken off. He's got that under interim hands right now as he takes off to Ole Miss. That's going to be a good game with Florida Atlantic having a fine season and SMU naturally being one of the great surprises of college football this year.
Conference champion Florida Atlantic. They won the championship game for Conference USA in its 25th year. And, of course, they have the advantage. They're playing at home. That game's being played at Alcatraz, and you know that's one of my favorites, John.
Oh, your favorite stadium. I'll tell you what, you'll never break out of that stadium.
Oh, no.
I'm telling you.
No, I love it.
They won't let you leave early.
That's right. they may never let me leave at all. I'll tell you, I love that place. You know, it is a beautiful. It's a beautiful stadium.
Will keep you there until the end of the fourth quarter.
That's a new stadium. It really is gorgeous. It's a great place to watch a game. You can't beat the weather. They had a sensational season, and of course, SMU certainly did. We're going to be talking about SMU a little later once again, John. In the second part of our interview, we're going to go back and visit SMU again. Here's another big ball game, John, right here. Yeah. This will be in Las Vegas. I believe the last time they play this game at Sam Boyd Stadium, and this year it's going to be Boise State and Washington. That could be a very compelling game.
Yeah, it is. You got to tip your hat to Chris Peterson. The job, that great coach that he did a splendid job there at Boise State, then went on to Washington and had a great run, just recently resigned his position there. Washington slipped this year, certainly in my regards, of their program being highly, highly touted around the country. Basically the only strong West Coast team in recent years, but they did slip this year. Mm-hmm. They did slip. And Boise State's coming after them with a 12-1 record. So, I would think Boise State would be favored in this one.
I'll tell you, Christmas Eve in Hawaii is going to be wild this year. Hawaii will be at home. BYU will be the opponent. Here's something that caught my eye, John. BYU attendance jumped way up this year. You realize that the Cougars averaged almost 60,000 a game at home at Edwards Stadium this year. That's quite an achievement.
Yeah, it is. I tell you, they did bounce back. They've been on the skids here in recent years, and they did bounce back. And, hey, they're going to have their hands full now playing in Hawaii. Anytime you go out to the islands and you play Hawaii there at their place, you're also facing a very hostile crowd, and you're facing a hostile group of officials. Officials, boy, do you ever get a raw deal when you're playing at home. I'm talking about the visiting team coming in there playing the home team. And in this bowl game, hey, this may be one of the worst called games in all the bowls. I'm telling you, It's going to be tough. It's going to be a real tough thing for these guys from BYU. They got their work cut out for them.
Yeah, remember, those officials have to live there. There's a lot of incentive for them. They have to live there all year long. It can get pretty tough visiting the grocery store if you mess up a few calls, can't it?
Yeah, that's right, buddy. You don't get any pineapples free on regular price. They'll be nailing you on that, I'm telling you.
Now you're talking. Day after Christmas, John, we should have a very interesting game, the Independence Bowl, and this one will match Miami and Louisiana Tech. And, Skip Holtz is a guy, he's a good big game coach.
Well, I'll tell you what, if he's got any help from his daddy, he's going to be a big-time coach. Lou, who I coached for, certainly was a big-time coach. And I'll say this, with traditionally an opponent coming in there like the University of Miami Hurricanes, what a great format this will be for those folks laying out this program there at the Independence Bowl in Shreveport. However, this is not the old Miami Hurricanes of old. This is not your Jimmy Johnson or Dennis Erickson, Larry Coker national championship caliber team. These guys took it on the chin late in the year here. They took it on the chin against Florida International. They come limping into this bowl game with a 6-6 record. Hey, I'm giving all the edge right here to Louisiana Tech at home. It's going to be a real home crowd looking for a big win from their homeboys, from them Louisiana Tech Bulldogs. You bet.
Yeah, I think so. NRG Stadium ought to be standing room only on the 27th, John. Oklahoma State and Texas A&M. All you need to do is have A&M in a bowl game in Houston. That's a guaranteed big seller. You know that as well as any. You've coached out there.
It sure is. And I tell you, they want to get a good taste back in their mouth after getting shelled. They want a little bit better representation, I would think. Limping in once again with a 7-5 record. And on the other hand, Oklahoma State, which was basically slated to be a rebuilding team, boy, did they come on like gangbusters, played well. I'm going to give the edge to these guys. I'm going to say, hey, it's Oklahoma State in this game right here.
Yeah, and Oklahoma State is so well coached year in and year out. They do a tremendous job. I have a feeling they'll have extra motivation, too, because not long ago, T. Boone Pickens passed away, and I'll bet you that he will be front and center on the minds of every one of those players, John.
Yeah, I tell you what, he was a great guy. Boone was a super person, a great promoter of that program, certainly built the stadium. And he'll be sorely missed. And this will be a great acknowledgement to go out and with a big win and acknowledge him on this day. It sure will.
All right, there you have it. Some thoughts from the High Plains drifter of college football. And John, relax for a little bit. We'll come back later. And we have some thoughts on some of what's been accomplished this year and who accomplished it. Next, we'll talk with Rex Lardner, Talk Shop. That is coming up on College Sports Weekly. Time to talk shop once again. In steps Rex Lardner, the man with a heavy bat, longtime television sports executive at CBS, NBC, and Turner. Also a former associate commissioner at Conference USA. Rex now consults the broadcasting industry, professional sports, and college sports entities, and he does so via digital audio from Tucson, Arizona. Rex, let's get into some money things, particularly television money. And, brother, this is right down your alley. We're about to see a significant amount of SEC game inventory go out to bid. CBS currently has the most prominent package. It's a game each Saturday, and they are first in the pecking order. They pay about $55 million a year for that one game each week. And the rumors are flying that the bidding for this game could go now as high as $300 million a year. ESPN and Fox would appear in a position to drive that bidding. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey is predicting a very significant increase, Rex, in the value of their television contracts. You've been involved with this stuff before. Take us inside what's going on here.
Sure, Bill, it's really supply and demand. And the most important part of it is how they do the bidding. Quite often, the network that has the first rights has a right to match a significantly bigger bid. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if, for argument's sake, let's say CBS bids $100 million for the package, going up from 55 to 100, which is almost double. I don't know if it'll get to 300, but it'll certainly get to 100, I believe. Mm-hmm. So if Fox and ESPN, Bill, put in bids that are above $100 million, CBS may have the right to match it, in other words, and keep the primary package and so forth. But I think a lot of it, and it could be closed bidding also, too. What you said is absolutely true, that Fox and ESPN are serious bidders that are driving the bidding up. The only thing I can't figure out, Bill, is all that ESPN has gone through. They've lost lots and lots of money. We've talked about the cord cutters and everything else, to pay an incredible rights fee for the U.S. Open event that they do, the tennis event, and many other sports, including the college football playoffs. I just don't know how they can afford, something of this nature.
Yeah, Rex, I've been asking one basic question. We've talked about this before, but it's worth looking at again right now. Just how high can these contracts go?
Bill, I don't think there's a limit. I really think the next step is one in which we've discussed before, is that CBS, ESPN, Fox get a corporate partner, such as Apple, Google, or Amazon. And all three want to get very much involved in sports. In fact, they are in sports to some degree now. But I just don't think, to answer your question, there is a limit, because it's related, as I mentioned earlier, to supply and demand.
Yeah. The SEC does a little smoke and mirrors here, Rex, which has always interested me. If you take a look at the respective footprints of these conferences, the SEC really, the teeth of their footprint is a relative group of smaller markets, and they rely on those smaller markets to achieve the same kind of revenues that the Big Ten has. And the Big Ten, of course, has New York, Chicago. They have everything except L.A., actually. They have a huge number of big markets. They cover about half of the country based on those markets. How has the SEC been able to get the same kind of money with smaller markets?
Bill, I think part of it's related to television ratings. The SEC ratings and the markets where their teams are located is through the roof. Mm-hmm. And I think they can charge more advertisers and sponsors upfront money because of these huge ratings. The answer to your question is that they can charge more because of incredible ratings in those small markets.
Here's an interesting story, Rex. Let's dig into this. And is the case quite often. This has to do with the state of California and legislation being developed by the state. California, as we both know, is often a leader in legislation. We just found that out recently with the fair play legislation coming out of the state, allowing college athletes to be compensated for marketing revenues from their likeness. And, of course, that is now being argued nationally. Well, here we go again. The state is cracking down on independent contractors. The blog site SB Nation has made extensive use of these independent contractor relationships. Now the state is limiting the number of submissions a contractor can make before they must be compensated as a full-time employee, and that number is 35 submissions a year. Rex, SB Nation is ending these relationships in California, the independent contractor ones, and instead they're hiring about 5 full-timers to do that work. They literally have over 100 of these independent contractors. What are the implications here?
Bill, I think like with television, it's all related to money. I mean, I think that the legislation is such that they feel they can get away with a small staff of 5 employees. The difference in dollars between the 35 submissions per year by an independent contractor and what they pay, 5 full-time employees is enormous. Bill, it's all related to money.
Yeah. We see independent contractors in sports broadcasting also, Rex. I work many of my arrangements in this way. Is it likely to carry over to college sports in some way?
Bill, I think it's early to tell, but I think it will. It's just too soon in the process, but I think it could have an impact on college sports. I mean, I think we'll know a lot more, Bill, in the next 6 to 8 months.
Here's the story that we teased from last week, Rex. We're going to have fun with this one. A company by the name of Soundware Norway is out to prove that radio no longer needs studios. They're trying to show that an entire radio station can be run from your car, particularly if you have a huge touchscreen display. And they tested this. They tested it on a Tesla Model 3, and those do have the big screen on them, a large display, and it has browser capability. And I guess the demonstration worked. The station computer controls came up on the browser, and you could even go on the air from the car if you had a microphone. How likely is it that radio stations will eliminate physical operations altogether?
Bill, maybe down the line. I think it's too early to tell, but I thought of the incredible amount of technology involved to even try this on a car with a large touchscreen. I think it could happen, but I just think the radio stations, Bill, and their facilities have so much more to offer and so forth. The quality of the thing, the engineering and the sales and all of that, in addition to the product. This may happen to some degree or with certain cars, but I think it's a ways away from happening.
Now imagine this one, Rex. You want to buy a radio station, Rexter Broadcasting wants to get going. And so I decided I'm going to buy a radio station. First thing I better do is go down and buy a Tesla Model 3 so that I have my touch screen. That's the first thing I have to do before I even think about the station. These are weird times.
They really are, Bill. I think the technology, as we've talked a lot about, gets more involved. And I think this is a perfect example of that. Although I go back to the point that building a 24/7 radio station whose production facilities are just used for live broadcast is really left unused.
Yeah. The times are changing, Rex. Last week we learned the Chicago Tribune was produced at a local McDonald's. This week we learned you can operate a radio station from your car without the need for physical studios. Rex, I'm seeing a theme here. None of these technical advances have made the product better, but all of them could be producing the product more cheaply. You and I come from a time when winning was about increasing revenues by improving the product. I don't know about you, but today I'm hearing very little of that. It's all about cutting expenses. I'd like your thoughts on that, Rex.
Bill, you have a great point. I think the product is the thing that suffers. It's become almost something that's secondary to the cheaper product. It's all related to dollars, and the product suffers. And consumers are hurt by this also. But I think, Bill, the world we live in, everything is related to cutting back on expenses. And if it means that the product suffers, that's what it means.
Yeah, nobody's reaching for anything. The industry is in a spiral, it seems to me. Everything is getting cheaper, but very little is getting better. How do you break that spiral?
Bill, it's very hard. I think with the technology advancing as we've talked daily, and we know that cheaper is not necessarily better. I think it's related to some of the other things we've talked about earlier in the show, and that is supply and demand.
Well, back to how technology is influencing what we are seeing. For the past few decades, Rex, satellite technology has served as the primary method for sending a remote sports broadcast from the site where the game is played to the studio for processing and distribution. That feed in the business is known as the backhaul. We've talked about this before. A couple of years ago, we began to see a gradual change from satellite-based backhauls to internet-based backhauls. I saw it on some of my broadcasts. At first, there were some rough edges. But now the technology, Rex, it's catching up. I was reminded of this with New Mexico State's announcement that they are switching over to internet backhauls, and they have 5 different video services carrying their games, a local TV station and several regional networks. They've removed the satellite dish. They no longer rent satellite time. This one stands out to me, Rex, because Las Cruces, New Mexico is pretty isolated. And you know what? If they can do it at New Mexico State, that has to speak volumes about where the industry is right now. What are your thoughts?
You know, Bill, I think it's just another technology story, like we've discussed earlier in the show, and I think more and more colleges are going to try to do that, especially if they have multiple syndication or satellite feeds or local regional channels. You had mentioned that you have ESPN, Fox Sports Arizona, Altitude Sports, Comcast, and KVIA. It's probably a cheaper way of doing it, and it's amazing, Bill, that so much of what we talk about is related to the internet. New possibilities in technology with the internet and less possibilities with satellite TV or some of the other devices we have. This will be a major change, and I think more and more colleges will do this.
You know, the interesting thing about it in my mind, Rex, is the internet completely eliminates distance as an operational issue. You remember the days of AT&T long lines where literally if you had a remote coming in, you were paying, what was it, whatever the rate was, $1 per mile per hour or something like that. I mean, it got up there. It got up there in a hurry. In this case, with the internet, it costs the same to send something across the street as it does to send it across the country. What are the financial ramifications of that for college athletics?
Bill, I think it's a very positive thing for college athletics. Just what you said, that it costs the same thing to send a signal across the street as it does across the country. And that's got to be a good thing and being cost effective for college sports. So I'd look at it as more exposure for college sports and less expense.
All right. Well, Rex, as always, it is a pleasure to visit. May I wish you a very happy holiday ahead here, and we will visit again soon.
Sounds great, Bill, and best to you. Certainly enjoyed today's show, as I have all 353.
And who's counting when you're having fun, Rex? Who's counting, I ask you?
Hope you have a great holiday season as well.
Thank you, Rex. You too. Rex Lardner, as always, steady and ready. We'll be back with more of College Sports Weekly. The regular season of college football is in the books, and you know what's just around the corner. And that is, of course, the College Bowl season culminating in the college football playoff, in which a national champion is to be determined. As we've done throughout the season, we're bringing Cody Kellner, the Kellner Ratings, back. He is joining us from Texas. Cody has a fascinating study of what actually is going on in college football through his ratings. We think they're pretty accurate on what the real story is. So Cody is back with us. Cody, as always, pleasure to visit. Your regular season ratings are in the books, and not a lot of surprises here. One thing I do notice, however, Georgia with 2 losses really ranks high in your poll. They're number 4, and even above Oklahoma, which got into the CFP, which you have currently at number 8. Take us through it.
Oh, yes, Bill. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. But yeah, I'm happy you brought up Georgia. You know, they're an interesting case study, if you will. They do obviously have 2 losses. One was at home to South Carolina. The other was a blowout loss in the SEC championship. But my rating system has them at number 4, and the main reason for that is when you dig into their schedule and what they've done this year. Yes, they have the 2 losses, but they've also beaten a good number of bowl-eligible teams and teams with winning records that ranks right up there with the likes of Ohio State and LSU. So despite the 2 losses, they have a tremendous amount of quality wins to go along with their resume. And when you put it all together right now, they're the number 4 team in the country, according to my ranking system.
Yeah. Cody, it's interesting. I think everybody agrees that Ohio State, Clemson, and LSU, all undefeated, they're virtually all automatic. Those slots are easy to fill. They deserve to be there. I think there's a lot of clarity on that. I don't think there are many people who are going to argue that. The question now is, which ranks on top? And as you know, the top seed went to LSU. But in your poll strongly favors Ohio State. And it's been that way all season long, Cody. Ohio State got a strong jump here, and there's been nothing that has slowed them down at all. And as a matter of fact, the rating that Ohio State has on your poll is sky high.
Yep, and that's an excellent point, Bill. And when you look at other computer ranking systems in the country, most of them will also have Ohio State at number one. I think Ohio State's success and their strength of schedule has been largely, I really don't want to say underappreciated, because they are number two in the playoff rankings. But nevertheless, I don't think that their success this year has gotten enough credit as what it deserves. Obviously LSU's got a tremendous amount of wins versus teams in the top 10, top 15. And I think while LSU has more obvious big quality wins, I think Ohio State's full body of work is representative of that of the number one team in the country. Mm-hmm. They've played a strength of schedule of like in the top 10. So they played one of the 10 toughest schedules, but every game they played, for the most part, they're winning in lopsided fashion. And those things went in Ohio State's favor this year, and that's why they're up at the number one team in the country. But it'll be interesting to see. Even though I have them at number one, doesn't mean I'm predicting that they'll end up winning the national championship. But on a historical note, in my ranking system, their rating is just under 170. It's at 169.17, and the only other team that's ever been ranked higher than them at this point in the season is the 2001 Miami Hurricanes. Mm-hmm. And so they're in a very rare territory in terms of a rating this high at this point in the season.
Boy, you are right. I've never seen numbers like that. You'd have to go back a number of years. So Ohio State does extremely well. Each year, it's kind of fun to think about the top 20, who is in it and who is not, as compared to a year ago. The one that really sticks out to me is Minnesota at number 19. I think if we had started at the beginning of the year, Cody, and tried to make a prediction, would Minnesota be in that group? Very few people would have said yes.
Oh, exactly, Bill. And, they lost two of their last three, but they're big rivalry games. They lost at Iowa. Iowa's traditionally a tough place for any team to play. It's, if I can recall, Ohio State's season for their bid for the playoff got derailed a couple of years ago with a loss at Iowa. And they also lost to Wisconsin. And those are two top-notch teams to have played and lost to. My rating system actually has Wisconsin at number 6. So in terms of the Big Ten, my rating system really liked the Big Ten and the SEC a lot this year. But Minnesota had a heck of a run. They're coming a long ways, but they lost two. Just in the Big Ten, there's always there's tough home games, there's tough road games, and Minnesota, despite their strength of schedule, they still had a tremendous year. I mean, they ended up with 2 losses, and when you face a schedule like they faced, a 2-loss Big Ten team, that's still there'll be a lot of teams that would like to have a year like that in the Big Ten.
Well, you're right, and there's some quality wins there. That win over Penn State, which currently ranks 9th in your poll, that really was a clear indicator that Minnesota was for real. It would be hard to deny Minnesota and the Gophers as being really good after that win.
Oh, exactly. And also back with Wisconsin, had Wisconsin won the Big Ten championship, my ranking system would have put Wisconsin in the top 4. And so, and also would have left Ohio State obviously at number 1 due to their high rating. So if Wisconsin would have won the Big Ten, my top 4 would have 2 of the top 4 would have been Big Ten schools.
Well, Cody, it's a fascinating discussion, no question, and it gives people a good view of what the CFP coming up is going to be all about, and it looks like Ohio State is going to be hard to handle, no doubt, according to your ratings. I'd like to invite you back. We have some other odds and ends regarding college football I'd love to cover through your ratings analysis, so if we can invite you back next week, we'd love to have you. And by the way, Cody, a very Merry Christmas to you and all of your friends and family. Cody Kellner reporting from Texas, the Keller Ratings, and you can find them at KellerRatings.com. We'll be back. Gene DeLisio covers the small college beat next on College Sports Weekly. Time to check out the small college beat, where Gene DeLisio reports the football action is getting hot and heavy. Gene?
Bill, college football playoffs are winding down. The FCS quarterfinals last week, James Madison blanked Northern Iowa 17-0. Montana State beat Austin Peay 24-10. Weber State beat Montana 17-10. And Coach Matt Entz and the defending national champion North Dakota State Ball Club held off a good Illinois State team, winning 9-3.
Things that we had talked about last week in regards to Illinois State came true. They're a very good football team defensively. They got a great running back. I have a ton of respect for James Robinson and how he plays, solid offensive line. So it took a whole team effort to get the win, and excited to move on to the semifinals.
North Dakota State football coach Matt Entz. The FCS semifinals are Saturday. Montana State is at North Dakota State, Weber State at James Madison. The Division II championship game is Saturday. Minnesota State plays West Florida at McKinney, Texas. Both teams earned upset wins in the semifinals. Minnesota State gouged Slippery Rock 58-15, and West Florida beat Ferris State 28-14. Now, West Florida lost to Valdosta 26-21 back on November 9th, and Coach Pete Shinnick and the Argos have not lost since.
You don't ever want to lose a game, but when we lost to Valdosta, I think a lot of guys understood what the moment was. You know, we were playing for the conference championship. We had an opportunity to beat the number one team in the country, and our guys just kind of let that moment engulf them a little bit in the first half. So, you know, we played great in the second half of that game, obviously lost it and haven't lost a game since. That teaching, learning moment, I think, is really part of what's propelled us to where we are right now. We talked about what needed to be done. We talked about how we needed to do it. They've come out and they've answered the call really week in and week out, down after down, and, you know, quarter after quarter, because, you know, we were down, we were up, our guys just, you know, they know how to handle those moments.
West Florida football coach Pete Shinnick. Two other national championship games this weekend. Wisconsin Whitewater plays North Central of Illinois for the Division III championship at Shenandoah, Texas. Morningside of Iowa meets Marion of Indiana in the NAIA final at Grambling, Louisiana. Still a lot of shock around the Northern Sun Conference about that decision to drop football at St. Cloud State and Minnesota Crookston. It was a hard day for St. Cloud coach Scott Underwood.
You don't think of this day the way it went down today. It's not how you figure that it's the last time you get to see the kids that you coach and the ones that are upcoming and the older ones. And so it's extremely emotional. As you probably saw the room there, and for all of our kids. And some of our kids have taken their last college snaps. And, you know, certainly I think it probably pushed harder on me when even my own child is in his second year here. And it's a difficult time for all of our kids. And like I said, our whole goal from our staff and the university is to help them transition to whether they want to stay or transfer. But as a head coach, it's you know, you always tell our kids on senior banquet day, the hardest day I ever have every year is with our seniors. And obviously today is tenfold of that.
St. Cloud State football coach Scott Underwood speaking with the St. Cloud Times. Underwood coached the Huskies the last 12 seasons and had winning records in 10 of those years. Veteran Pittsburgh State football coach Tim Beck stepping down after 10 seasons as head coach and 33 years on the Gorillas coaching staff. Beck played at Pittsburgh State, joined the coaching staff in 1987, and was named head coach in 2009. Beck was 82-35 as head coach at Pittsburgh State and led the Gorillas to the NCAA Division II National Championship in 2011. Mike Turner stepping down as head coach at Carson Newman. He coached the Eagles the last 3 years, but also assisted in the Carson Newman program for 33 years before taking over when the late Ken Sparks retired in 2016. Turner spent 47 years as a football coach.
Had an honor to be a coach at Carson Newman for 36 years, and I played here for 2 years, so that's 38 years of my life I've been blessed to have been an Eagle. The last 3 years has been a very humbling experience to be the head coach at Carson Newman. There's been some great men come before me that were head coaches at Carson Newman University. And to have relationships like you have when you're the head coach with these kids, one-on-one deals, has really been a great experience for me, a great blessing in my life.
Outgoing Carson Newman football coach Mike Turner, he was 24-10 in 3 seasons at Carson Newman. Longtime Franklin and Marshall men's basketball coach Glenn Robinson is retiring. Robinson has served as head coach at Franklin and Marshall since 1971 and is 6th on the all-time list of men's basketball college coaching victories at 967, ahead of well-known coaches such as Bob Knight, Jim Calhoun, and Dean Smith.
It is truly an honor to be mentioned in a sentence with people like that. And of course, Dean Smith being a friend and a mentor and someone that I admired probably above everyone else in basketball. Mm-hmm. To be mentioned doing anything the same as Dean Smith is just about as high a compliment as you could give me. So as I've said, I haven't won any of the games, but I do think it's quite an honor.
Retiring Franklin and Marshall men's basketball coach Glenn Robinson. Bill, that's our small college sports update for this week. I'm Gene DeLisio reporting.
Thank you, Gene, and we'll check in with you once again next week. When we return, Coach John Jenkins highlights several teams that outperformed expectations during the regular season. That's next on College Sports Weekly. Earlier in the program, we got some predictions on some of the bowl games that are coming up as we enter the bowl window. We're just underway with it, and John shared some of his feelings about some of the big ball games, and the High Plains drifter of college football has drifted back. John, I thought a good way to open this segment would be to talk a little bit about some of the surprises in college football this year. Teams that surprised us by their exemplary play and delivered a lot more than we expected. Who would be on that list for you?
Bill, I tell you what, 3 jump out at me just remarkably, because of all 3 of them have had win streaks going all the way through, I guess, their first 8 games of the year, and that's Minnesota, SMU, and naturally Baylor. All 3 of those coaches, you know, they were our Coach of the Year candidates right up into the time where they finally got, all 3 of them got knocked off in the late stages and with 2 losses. But what a sensational year all 3 coaches had, and their coaching staffs did a wonderful job getting those guys not just on the winning track, but I'm talking about propelling them into great bowl games here with 9-2 records. And what a sensational job in all 3 areas there with Baylor, Minnesota, and SMU.
That's a good way to put it, too, John, because each one of those situations is something of a unique signature. You have Minnesota and PJ putting that thing together as fast as he did. Coach Rule had a huge challenge at Baylor. They had a lot to overcome. I can't believe how they got there so fast. And then, of course, Coach Dykes there in Dallas with the job that he did. You know, SMU wants to be in the Big 12, and they're going to start making the case. And this is a good first step for making that case. Talk about either of those 3, John.
Let's talk about Baylor first of all. You know, here's a program that had all kinds of problems where the scandals there and just the misfortune with the previous program and the athletic director resigning and certainly Art Briles being impacted unfairly in my opinion, but nevertheless the NCAA allowed every one of those players to say, hey, you want a fresh start? You can leave Baylor and you can transfer and you won't be affected. There was a lot of great players that Art Briles brought in there and really busted his tail in recruiting that left that program and went to Texas and went to other programs. So Coach Rule, he had an empty cupboard. And boy, did he ever pay for it in the early stages. I'm talking about a 1 win and 11 losses, and then he built from there. And this season, as mentioned, hey, he's 8-0. He's 8-0 at one point. Certainly a great Coach of the Year candidate for us, and got knocked off by Oklahoma on 2 occasions there with their in the regular season and in the conference championship game. But what a sensational job he did along with his coaching staff. And that is just fascinating to me how they were able to get this thing back so fast.
SMU is an interesting story. You'd have to go back to the days when I was broadcasting SMU, and that was a long time ago, brother. The dinosaurs were still roaming the earth back then, and I was one of them. And to see them start off like they did, we haven't seen a team like that really since Ron Meyer was there and the Pony Express backfield and all of that. You know the excitement of that.
Yeah, it was Dickerson and James with Ron Meyer with those 2 great running backs, Dickerson and James. After that, for decades, it was Bartles and James. And, no longer was there any images of Dickerson and James. But in all seriousness, Bill, it's been, I want to say the 1983-84 campaign. You got to reach all the way back to that point to see that kind of a start that Sonny Dykes was able to put out with, I think, an 8-0 run before he finally got knocked off. And really happy for Sonny and his coaches, and what a magnificent job they did this season.
You were talking about the problems that Coach Rule had, and I can tie that directly to SMU, and you've spoken about this because you remember Forrest Gregg, of course, who passed away this year. We lost Forrest, coming in there with all of the weight he had to carry. That tells you just how hard it really is to get a program back and running.
It sure was. And not only did Forrest have that death penalty of restocking the cupboard, it was an administration that right there in SMU's own backyard that held him down. And that was a president that revamped their entire enrollment program and said, hey, we will not accept anybody under 1,000 on the SAT. And, you put a competitive handcuff on all those coaches.
You're right about that, President. He wanted SMU to be the Harvard of Highland Park. That's what his vision was.
That's right. Well, it's like this. I jokingly told Forrest, I said, hey, you got a bunch of great kids, but they're flunking football. Yeah. They're flunking football. I said, you gotta have that pool of talent that Texas A&M, Houston, and everybody else is able to dip into, and that it was very, very unfair that they had to absorb that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about P.J. Fleck and the job he did. You may remember 2 years ago, right about now, he would have been at Western Michigan and getting ready to appear in the Cotton Bowl with Western Michigan after an amazing year in which they suffered only 1 loss, I believe, for the entire season. Here he is at Minnesota, and brother, did he turn that around in a hurry.
Yeah, I tell you, you and I both really enjoyed them, watching them throughout the season, reeling once again, just like as we mentioned previously with Baylor and SMU, run the table on a win streak that they haven't seen since Moby Dick was a minnow. And I'm telling you, Coach Flick and his staff did a great job. And, then in recruiting as well, there was no flukes there. We saw them line up with some caliber players, top-notch caliber guys that can really swap ends of the field, and skilled talent and big, strong linemen that they're normally noted for anyway. But, boy, did they compete hard, and what a great season they had.
John, it's always a pleasure. You know that. Now, next week, let's come back and set the stage for the CFP semifinals, if you will, the Final Four, and some of the other playoff games. We have several more weeks of playoffs coming up, and so let's talk about it. And may I wish you a happy holiday, and we'll see you right after that.
You bet, Bill. I tell you what, Merry Christmas to you, buddy.
Merry Christmas, buddy.
Enjoy these bowl games. We'll talk to you next week and enjoy these bowl games, Bill.
Oh, I'm going to do it, John. That's for sure. And I'll tell you what, everybody out in Hawaii is going to have some fun out there. BYU travels heavy. And, brother, they make a lot of noise. You know that. That's about the wildest bunch you're ever going to get in your town, I'll tell you. They are something else. All right, John. We will be back with more of College Sports Weekly. Time to head for home. College football attendance is down nationally, but the problem is most acute in the Pac-12. Why that conference more than the others? The story next week. And now let's introduce our team. The executive producer is Keith Haney. Coordinating producer Bo Carter. Small college editor Gene DeLisio. And a special thanks to sports information officers throughout the country for their contributions to this program. Now, this is Bill Hazen saying thanks for being with us. Be sure to tell your friends about us. And we'll see you next week on College Sports Weekly.